All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Natty News Daily podcast. We've got the three amigos finally back on a pod together. I will be speaking since Leroy is just starting to feel the effects of prep. He felt like he wanted to sit back and chill for a bit, which allows me to introduce Mr. Kyle Gallant, WNBF president for UAE and for India, and one of the lead promoters, if not the lead promoter, and you can correct me, as we go along here for the new show, the WNBF Galaxy, which will be kind of the main topic for this podcast. So, Kyle, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, yeah. We've talked, a couple times about this already. We've seen lots of different posts about it. It was one of like the bigger news announcements of the year. So let's just dive right into it. So a little bit of your background, right? We talked, you do quite a bit of head judging. You're president for two different WNBF affiliates. The UAE show is one of the bigger shows in that region as well. Talk a little bit so people know who you are and where you're kind of coming from first before we dive into the things.
Yeah, so I really got into bodybuilding actually quite late, to be honest. Grew up in Canada, grew up playing ice hockey, and then one too many
Canada.
con yeah, one too many concussions in that sport, and so I actually went to the US and I was playing basketball for a little bit. After that, I came to Dubai, and when I was done kind of playing basketball, done with all the other sports, as an athlete, you just kind of need something to motivate you, to push you, to work towards. And that's really, I started getting into the gym with basketball, but it was more sport specific. And then after I was done that portion of my life, it was like, okay, I need something to work towards. And so I started getting into bodybuilding. And it wasn't about maybe 4 or 5 years till I did my first show. And then I kind of got hooked on it, right? When you do your first show, either you love it or you hate it. So, most people they compete and I would say 80% do one show and they're done. Or then there's those that do their first show and then that's all they want to do from then on. That was kind of so then the second season, at least with the WNBF, I went to Germany uh, because there was no WNBF in the Middle East at the time. I'd already made the move to Dubai. And when I was in Germany, I was waiting, I think it was for the polygraph actually. And I was just talking to some of the athletes there and I actually met who then went on to be my business partner here in Dubai for WNBF UAE. His name's Charles Barkley. And he told me he's from Dubai. He came to Germany, same thing from as me, because there's no event in the Middle East. So we just started talking from there. And then when COVID hit, we really started the conversation on like, it'd be great if we could bring this to the Middle East so that, the athletes in that region have an opportunity. Because at the moment, there's really nothing in the region. You look at all these bigger federations like WNBF, ICN, INBA, pretty much any natural federation is not in the region. It's almost all IFBB. So we got the conversation going, and then we had the first event in 2021. It was a relatively small event that had a lot of obstacles because there was never any type of drug testing in the region before. So we I joked about this. I did a chat the other day with some of the guys from Asia, and I said in our first show, um, Bob Bell, the president of WNBF, was flying out to come see the show as well as support us. And he just got on the plane when we started our first polygraph test, and we had gotten through the first seven athletes, and in the first seven athletes, we had four fail. So it was a crazy introduction to drug tested bodybuilding in the region. But then after that, with awareness, with building out what natural bodybuilding is, with educating the athletes, as well as growing the event, it started to get a lot better in terms of the drug testing. Athletes respected the rules a little bit more. And now we're going on, I believe this will be our fourth year, 2025. And yeah, the event has blown up in the past couple of years with WNBF UAE. It's just gotten bigger and bigger. Last year was a massive success, and we just kind of want to keep that ball rolling and turn it into a show that athletes can be proud to attend. Athletes enjoy their time on stage. They get great media. They get also great cash prizes. Something we've really leaned into is trying to continue to raise the bar when it comes to the cash prize payouts, because at least in my view, that's one thing that's kind of drastically missing in natural bodybuilding. I know we do it for the love of the sport, but that's just kind of my ideology with it, is that we need to raise the bar with that. And so along came the kind of idea with the WNBF Galaxy is we can create this event if we can just get people to come together and kind of, all focus on something together and put all of our resources into that project. We can create an event that is bigger than any one country can do. And fortunately, in the past couple of years, I've had the pleasure of, traveling. I think last year I went to 12 events worldwide for judging. And you get to know a lot of the judges, you get to know a lot of the promoters in that region, especially in Asia. And we just had a really good working relationship together. Everyone seemed to kind of have the same idea, the same mindset as to where the sport went. And so that's where the conversations and the idea came together for the Galaxy is if we could bring, not just one or two events together, but if we could bring five of these events together, we could create something that would not only have the production value, the media value, but also the cash prize value that is kind of missing in natural bodybuilding. I do know there's some events that have that. So I know there's some events in America that have that. I mean, you guys always talk about Mr. America. I know they give out quite a big cash prize. The Worlds gives out a decent cash prize. So does, the INBA event. But we really want to do something within the WNBF because obviously that's where we kind of have our loyalties to. And we also believe in the mission that they have going forward. So yeah, the conversation started with WNBF Taiwan, WNBF WNBF UAE, WNBF UK, and I believe I'm missing someone, so I apologize for that. Malaysia, UK, Korea, Taiwan, UK, and
That time
some of
around,
the
you
other
didn't
countries.
mention yourself. So UAE, you're forgetting about yourself. Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, we were at Taiwan's event, and we went out to dinner after we were done the judging, and we just started the conversation because it's already been kind of an idea that's been in process, but then we started really discussing it. And after a few months of just back and forth meetings, we reached out to Bob Bell from the WNBF and said, look, we have this great idea that we can all come together and all pool our own resources into this event. And we really think it'd be something great for the WNBF, especially because in Asia, I'm not sure if you guys have made it out to Asia yet, but in Asia, natural bodybuilding it's like basically a professional sport, right? So when you think about like basketball and football and these other sports, that's the type of notoriety that it's getting over in Asia. And so we really saw the opportunity if we could put something there, we can definitely get the sponsorships, we can definitely get the athletes, we can definitely get the media that we want to have. And it was just about then creating the plan and getting the approvals, and everything kind of went smoothly so far, knock on wood, but I'm sure there'll be a lot more to come.
Yeah, yeah. Don't jinx yourself too early, especially on our podcast. But one thing I wanted to circle back to because you mentioned right, like you mentioned some of the bigger shows with bigger prize pools. All three of those that you mentioned, Worlds, Mr. A, and Natty O, are all in the States, right? So I think it's huge too what you're doing, it not being in the States, right? Giving an opportunity for athletes from other regions of the world to get on a stage of that level, and also just to ease some of the burdens of travel, right? Like I've had conversations with a lot of different, federation heads and athletes and promoters and stuff, and it's always like, that I just can't fathom like to have to always travel to the States, 6 hours, 12 hours on a plane, even longer for some people, the expenses of that. So to be able to put something in certain athletes, backyard and capitalize on that market like you guys are doing, I think is huge. And just I think it's going to raise the success of it, right? Like just the number of athletes in those Asiatic shows is remarkable. We've talked about it, right? Like you would know the numbers better than I, but like 200 plus athlete shows is kind of the norm, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are up above 400, right? So WNBF Taiwan show last year, I think was 425 athletes or something like that. So
Wow.
really, really big. But yeah, kind of touching on what you said, it's not really to take away. I think it's only good for the sport if we have more of these big events. Um, because if you look, and I know natural bodybuilding, we don't like to talk about the other side of the sport, the enhanced side of the sport. But if you look at the IFBB, what they're doing, right? They have the Olympia, they have the Arnold, they have something like the New York Pro, as well as all these amateur Arnolds around the world. Now they have the Dubai Pro, which is really, really big. And so having more of these premier events only allows your best athletes to come together. And I think when you look at other sports, when those sports get the best viewership is when you have premier names coming up against each other. And the biggest issue with natural bodybuilding is you just don't get these head-to-head matchups that much. So if you can provide events that draw them in, like that are big enough, that have enough of a cash prize, production, everything to draw in some of these big names, you're going to get more people watching the event. Like if you watch basketball, if Steph Curry and LeBron are playing each other, ratings go up. If you watch, soccer, if Messi and Ronaldo are playing against each other, ratings go up. So the more of these big events that can attract in better athletes to compete against each other, especially at the pro level, like last year at Worlds when you got Babacar versus you just had him on the podcast now. I forget the professors. All I remember
Oscar.
his name.
Yeah, Oscar.
Like when you get names like that going together, people take notice, right? And so I think just more events like this are just great for the sport, and that's what we're trying to do. And in Dubai, we get a lot of athletes from the Middle East, from Africa, that just they can't go to Worlds, they can't go to some of these events in America, like the Mr. America or the WNBF World Championship. They can't get the visa, right? So if you provide a platform or an event where they can go compete, then you're also going to start uncovering some talent that people might not honestly know about. Like if you look at some of the athletes that come to our Dubai show, especially the guys from Africa, we have some really, really amazing athletes that I think could go up against almost anybody in the sport, but they can't get the visa to Worlds. So we provide this platform in a country where they can go travel to, they can compete, and it's something for them to work towards. And then if you look at Asia, for example, with, we said there's 200 plus, 400 plus athletes at events. At Worlds, you don't really see a lot of these athletes because it is quite difficult for them to afford to travel. So one of the other missions of the event is to help them afford the travel. So we'll be paying for flights for the top athletes, helping them with visas where we can. And then obviously the cash prizes as well can go a long way towards helping them with accommodations and registration and so forth. So it's really just trying to provide another platform for athletes, especially in this side of the world, who may not necessarily be able to go to Worlds or who may need the help to getting to Worlds, right?
I think that's like super underappreciated, like how hard it can be for athletes to get there. Like when you were talking about, certain athletes not being able to travel and get visas and stuff. Like there's probably so many great athletes that we've never heard of or like have never stepped on stage or at least a notable stage like in those countries, like you said, Africa and stuff like that. There's probably future world champions that are trying to find somewhere to go compete, but like haven't been able to or haven't been able to afford to or whatever the case may be, right? So I think, what you're doing is probably opening a door that's yet to be opened for a lot of people that are like, oh, I can finally do something that's not only like a legitimate massive event, but gives me an opportunity to step on stage with other great competitors, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a platform. It's just a platform for them to aspire towards achieving something great in the sport, but also hopefully, with what we're trying to do with it is trying to create some type of promotional aspect for them as well. So we want to create a platform for them, with a high quality live stream, with good media and content creation. It's only going to give these athletes something to work towards. And I think if we just have low end pro shows, and we just kind of stick with the same model, then especially in regions where they won't have access to go to some of the bigger shows, they're really just going to look at other avenues, right? And so we're
Yeah.
missing the ball completely if we don't explore those avenues. And I mean, I give credit to WBF leadership for being open to the idea that we came to them with, because obviously there was a lot of people that were questioning how does this reflect on worlds, like what does this look like for the world champion. That was never our intention. Our intention was to grow the sport as a whole and grow the athletes as a whole, who are trying to compete in this sport, but then they don't see an avenue for themselves to grow. And I go back to what I said, like we have athletes that come to the Dubai show all the time, or I see athletes in Taiwan or in Hong Kong that I just don't see on those big stages in the US. But then I see, the world championship I've been to for the past few years. I'm just like, man, if this guy could go to the world, or if this guy
Yeah.
could, they would do some damage. But they just don't have that opportunity. So we're trying to create that opportunity for them.
So would you say just like to connect the dots a little bit, Worlds is still the premier, you know, cream of the crop, and you guys are trying to pool a bunch of, athletes together that maybe can't get there. And then you mentioned like paying for flights and stuff like that. So maybe we're going to see, that group of 10 athletes that you're like, man, if they were up there, this would be unreal, along with the normal crop that we see. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of like where we're probably headed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Worlds will always, at least within the WNBF. I mean, I know there's other federations with other big shows. Within the WNBF, it will always be like the premier show.
Sure.
I don't think for us giving out any like extra cash prize or anything like that, it takes away from World Championship. Actually, what we're trying to do is get more of these athletes in our region to be able to go to that stage because it was
Yeah.
quite, if I'm being blatantly honest, it was quite disappointing for me last year when I was at the World Championship, because every single time, you're having the award ceremony, there's a Spanish flag or a French flag or a British flag, and it's pretty much all of Europe and North America as well as some of Latin America. And I'm thinking at all the athletes that came to our Dubai show from Africa, from the Middle East, from Asia, or at the Taiwan show from Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan. And there's so many great athletes. And I would just love to see them have the ability to go to that stage and represent their country, just like the Olympics, right? Like you want to see the best of the best athletes represent their country. And it brings so much pride to those countries when they see someone like them doing
Yeah.
well. Right.
Yeah.
So, if there's someone from, let's say, Taiwan who goes, for example, Zach Chow, right? If you guys know who Zach Chow is, he won the men's physique tall at Worlds in the pro division. I think he's a three-time world champion for the WNBF, but he has just created so much popularity to natural bodybuilding in the sport because it's someone from Taiwan that's like them that has a similar journey to them, and they're seeing him on this highest level be able to achieve great things. And we're just trying to make that process easier for all the athletes in our region, so the Middle East and Africa, as well as in the Asian region.
You're creating a pipeline to feed worlds with some of these untapped markets is kind of like a way
Yeah,
to put it.
yeah. Yeah, but then at the same time, if they just can't get to Worlds because of visa, at least they have this show which they can aspire to go to and do really well at and make some good money and get some really good exposure for themselves. So yeah, it's a pipeline to Worlds, but it's also an avenue for athletes who will never be able to go to Worlds to give them something to work towards, right? Because that's all we want as athletes is just something worthwhile to work towards.
Let's break down that like the payout structure because I know that was one of the big things, right? And I think that topic you just mentioned is actually relevant, right? Because you said you'd be willing to pay for the flights. If people can't make it, then there's like a cash value, right? So you're trying to be fair for these athletes and try and, not force them in one direction or the other, right? So $100,000, I think, was the total pool. How's that broken down between like all the divisions and the payouts and stuff, if you have those numbers?
I have the numbers. Yeah, I got to pull it up on me now, but let me see. Because we put out a post on Instagram on the Galaxy page that kind of detailed each individual breakdown. Um, yeah, so bodybuilding, it's 11,000 total for the winner, 10,000 for cash, 1,000 for flight, and then it kind of works down from there. And it's like that for each pro category. So, first place might get 10,000 or 9,000 US dollars. Everybody in the top three in all the pro classes will get cash towards their flight, right? And then the individual overall amateur champions of each class, pro qualifying class, will also get cash voucher towards their flight. But again, I understand because I coach a lot of athletes myself who have tried to go to the US and they just can't get visas. If they can't get the visa, even if with all the help that we're going to try to give to them to getting those visas, as well as WNBF official giving them help towards getting the visa process, if they just can't go, then it's not fair to them to like, okay, I got this $1,000 cash voucher, but what do I do with it? So there will be a cash exchange option. So if they can't use the flight, then that's just $1,000 into their pocket anyways, right? So trying to keep it fair. But at the end of the day, we understand like as even with as much help as we want to give to visa process, some athletes just won't be able to make the trip.
So with the voucher, did you opt to do that versus just a pure cash prize because the taxes, or that's just a curious question.
We want to motivate athletes to represent their country at the World Championship, right? So, here's $1,000 towards your flight, which is, from Asia, especially, that's pretty much the total of a flight to go from Asia to, let's say, Los Angeles. But if they can't go at the end of the day, then they still get the cash anyway. So they're not going to miss out on that. There's no tax benefit or anything like that we're talking about. It's just we're trying to promote the best athletes in the world going to the world championship.
Nice. And just because this is something that I was kind of originally confused with, just to clarify, qualification process and that the athlete pool is open to all WNBF pros, right? Not just the athletes that are representative with like the co-sponsors of the event, correct?
All WNBF pros, all amateurs who compete in the W. So basically, to qualify for the Galaxy, you just need to compete in a single WNBF event in that calendar year, right? So Leroy is a pro competing at the Hercules. He would be qualified if he wanted to go all the way to Malaysia. He'd be qualified for the Galaxy just by competing. It doesn't matter if he came sixth place. I'm sure he won't come sixth place, but it doesn't
Thanks.
matter what placing he gets. He'll be qualified to compete.
Perfect. Yeah.
Matters to us. He'll be booted off Natty News if he takes 6.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not allowed to slide that far back.
Yeah, something went dastardly wrong if that's the case. Or I was against all these incredible Asian athletes and they all showed up to the Hercules.
Unlikely, but
So
go ahead.
sorry, we just wanted to keep it as open as possible, but then at the same time, we don't want to take away, especially from some of these really small events around the globe. Some events in certain countries are very small. Let's say they get 50 or 60 athletes. We don't want 10 of their athletes just to be like, okay, I'm just going to go to the Galaxy, right? And bypass completely, these smaller events. So to protect some of the smaller countries, we said you just need to compete once in the WNBF this year, and then you can compete in the Galaxy.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense, right? Any other misnomers or things that you guys have like seen pop up since you've made announcements and kind of like myths that you want to discuss or, controversies that you want to like openly talk about and just like, correct?
I mean, you guys probably know more about these controversies or myths than I do, to be honest, because I got so many things going on with the UAE and India and then this Galaxy. I don't have my finger on the pulse of, the news as much as
Probably not a bad thing, to be honest.
Yeah. Just keep your head the
I
same.
think a lot of people,
Where
yeah,
did
a lot of,
where did the Galaxy come from? I'm just curious. Like why did you guys choose that name? Was there any specific reason?
honestly, to be honest, we wanted to do something like Universe, but it's just so overdone in
Yeah, that's
bodybuilding.
taken for sure.
So we just came up with something original because it's not been done before. I did see the one, I can't remember what podcast it was, but they were talking about like, oh, it's called the Galaxy. That's bigger than the world. Like, I wonder if that's a shot. It's not a shot. We wanted to create a show that was called the Universe, but then at the same time, there's about 3 or 4 other universes in different federations. So we wanted something a little bit different. And that's just, the idea that we all kind of liked was the Galaxy. It's that simple.
That's fair.
I think people put way too much stock in like what a show is named, right? Like you mentioned some of the IFBB shows, like one of their biggest shows, the New York Pro. Like that's it. Like there's nothing special about the name. It's literally like where it's hosted, it's a pro show and people like respect that name, right? So like it's what you do for the athletes and the tradition of the show that'll like create, establish the name. But yeah, we've definitely seen that. We've heard those things as well. Like, oh, this is bigger than that. And it's like, all right, cool.
For you guys kind of pay attention to everything, right? Which is great for the sport because you can create these narratives and you can talk about the different stories that are going around the world. For me, it's kind of a bit more healthy for my mental sanity to not pay attention to every little story that you hear. Because at the end of the day, a lot of it is just speculation, like, oh, I wonder if it's this, I wonder if it's that.
Yeah.
So unless I come on to the show and talk to you guys or talk to a different podcast, that's the only way I can really get rid of some of those narratives because, I can see where people come from when they say, the Galaxy name or the cash prize or this, but it wasn't anything sinister for us. It's just about growing the sport, growing the brand, and really capitalizing on just how big it is over in this part of the world, right? Like I invited James to come over to the Galaxy if you ever got the chance, and he was a bit too busy this year, but any of you guys, if you get the chance, like to come, let's say to the Dubai show or you come to any of the Asian shows to just see how big natural bodybuilding is, I think you would just absolutely love it. I know you guys went to, was it Denmark last year? It was Denmark,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a different atmosphere even there compared to
for
North
sure.
America. And
Oh yeah.
so, I'm just speaking from what I've seen. I judged last year all over Europe. I judged all over Asia, and then I judged at the Worlds. In Asia, man, it's such an exploding market. And so we wanted to do something together to capitalize on that market. And that's where the idea came from.
Why do you think it's so big? Like even for us in Denmark, like the pure passion and like just raw love for natural bodybuilding, and I'm going to capitalize natural bodybuilding because it's a very clear we love this sport naturally. Whereas like in North America, maybe it's because of social media, TikTok, like all that shit, where it's like gear use is so heavily almost encouraged now at this point, especially in younger athletes. Like, why do you think just natural bodybuilding specifically has gotten so popular?
I think it really just depends on the cultures, right? I think in Asia, something like taking drugs, taking steroids is really looked down upon. It's not really an
Sure.
accepted practice. I
Yeah.
could even compare like here living in Dubai compared to living in Canada, right? Like it's completely different, right? And
Yeah.
that is massive here in Dubai. If you look at the Dubai Pro, they're starting to put up numbers kind of like the Arnold's. It's just a really, really big event now. Then we also have the Dubai Muscle Show. We have so many big, massive events in Dubai. And so the culture kind of dictates how successful natural bodybuilding will be. Luckily for us, um, there is a lot of people in the Middle East as a whole that really, want to do natural bodybuilding. So for us in Dubai, we're still able to work between it. But I think in Asia, especially a lot of these Asian countries, the culture is just different. Like taking steroids,
Yeah.
taking drugs is just not seen as it's a lot more taboo than a lot of other places. So if you want to get into the sport of natural bodybuilding or fitness, then that's seen as a lot more of the safe route. It's seen as a lot
Yeah.
more of the acceptable route.
Sure.
And so, you're looking at athletes who are getting big time sponsorships from these big brands because those brands want to promote natural athletes. They
Yeah.
don't want the other side of the sport. And I think it's, we're in a tricky place in the sport of natural bodybuilding because if you look at any other sport around the globe, um, all the big sponsorships get taken away if an athlete fails a drug test. If you look at an athlete who fails a drug test at the Olympics or an athlete who fails a drug test in the NFL or the NBA, it's this completely dramatic thing. The sponsors pull back, everybody pulls back. But for some reason in bodybuilding, it's the opposite, right? Where the enhanced side of the sport seems to get all of the sponsor money, all the corporate money, and the natural side of the sport is kind of scratching, clawing for that. Whereas, it's kind of cool when I go to Asia to see that it's a little bit different there. Of
Yeah.
course, the enhanced sport is also big, but the companies are really invested into natural bodybuilding. So the athletes as well, they see the opportunity. Okay, if I go do really well, I become a WNBF pro, I win WNBF Taiwan's Asia show. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have a
Yeah.
lot of opportunity to get, let's say, Optimum Nutrition or
Wow.
all these brands on board. So, and there's a lot of clothing brands as well that have just grown out of natural bodybuilding in that region too. So it's really cool to see. It's where I think the sport of natural bodybuilding is moving in the right direction. I do think it's moving in the right direction in other regions too. But when I go to Asia, I really just see how big it has become, and all the credit to the promoters there, because they're doing a phenomenal job.
Almost like in some areas of the world, the brands are like, where you are and these shows, it's like longevity, health, wellness. We want to support that. Whereas where we are, it's like fame, clicks, views. We want to support that, right? Because it's such a contrast of, if we were to describe who's getting those sponsorships and those brand deals and stuff in North America, it's going to be a very different demographic than who you're describing probably getting those potential deals where you are, right? So it's awesome to hear because hopefully that then starts to trickle in globally.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I would say for 90% of the cases, like if you want to get some type of sponsor deal or brand deal, you need to have a certain amount of following on social media. It's just the
Yeah.
world that's just the world we live in now. It doesn't matter if you're in North America or here, right? But I do think that, the sport being as big as it is and as popular and accepted as it is amongst the culture, that really helps these athletes a lot more. And I would hope that, moving forward, the sport is moving in that direction in other regions as well. And I think it is. It's just going to take a bit of time, right? Because for decades and decades and decades, when you think about bodybuilding, you think about the Olympia, right? And so we've got some ground to make up. And, kind of the model that with the Dubai show, as well as with this Galaxy show that I've, had in my head, and as well as the other promoters who are working equally with me on this, is if you think of it as like a chart, right? And you have, let's say, the monetary gain and the health risks. Let's say the health risks and the monetary gain. And right now, let's say an average natural show, a guy gets, let's say 3,000, 5,000, or at best $10,000. And then you look at these non-natural shows like the Olympia or wherever, they get 100,000 or 200 or so on and so forth. The gap between the risk to take drugs or take steroids for their health and the monetary gain that they'll make from winning a show or for sponsorships or whatever is quite large, right? And for me, it's about like we need to try and close that gap where if we look at the risk, right, the risk starts to outweigh the monetary gain. Right now, if you look at it like the Olympia is here, let's say the world is here in terms of that, and the risk is about this to take steroids for their health, there's still a big gap between the two. But if we can close that gap where, the monetary gain and the social promotion that they're going to get from being a great athlete is smaller, and that health risk is starting to overlap, then we're looking at the growth of natural bodybuilding, because athletes aren't going to be as tempted to go the other route because the risk outweighs the reward. And that's what we need to close.
Mm-hmm. And that's not even to discuss like the percentage of athletes that will ever actually win money, right? Like people chase that because they see those big prize pools. But if you look at the total athletes that have won money, IFBB or natural, it's very few, right? So yeah, to chase that, put your health at risk for this big reward, but be one of, thousands and thousands of athletes vying for, 3 prize pools. It's a pretty low chance that you're actually going to do it. And now you've risked so much to try for it.
But I do think it's a lot about the perception, right? It's a lot about the perception, what the athletes see online. They don't really know all of the history. They maybe know a few names. They don't know all the history. It's what they see in front of them. And if you can close that gap where an athlete says, okay, like, great, I could become an IFBB pro or potentially win this cash prize or get this sponsorship. If you can really close that gap between the two where, there's the monetary gain from if you're, one of those top athletes, as you just mentioned, but also from the point where, in today's world, if you can create a great following and also compete, and natural bodybuilding is popular to the point where brands will come on board, then you don't really see that risk as something you're willing to take. And we really need to close the gap between the two. So one of the areas, at least for me with Dubai, as well as our group with the Galaxy, is closing the gap monetarily. So trying to offer more and more cash prize. This year, Dubai is going from 20 to 30, the Galaxy is 100, trying to close the gap. But then as well, like looking at a market like Asia and the popularity that I said it has, trying to really create a platform where athletes, if they are proactive, if they are trying to create a name on social media and whatnot, when they do well at a show, hopefully that catapults them to another trajectory. Just like in the IFBB, if a guy has a good name for himself on social media and then he goes wins an IFBB pro card and goes and competes at these shows, brands are likely to come on board. And we want to create the same environment, right? So it's really just about closing the gap between the two. And I think we're working in the right direction. So I'm really, really optimistic.
Yeah.
Love it.
Go ahead, Leroy. Did you have something there?
I was just saying, I love that. I think it's all, you're doing so much good for the sport, and you're like leading a charge that hopefully will trickle into more people doing that.
Oh,
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. But again, it's everyone has to come and put in that effort, right? Like if I was just to do it myself, it would be impossible. Thankfully, I have all my partners on this Galaxy. We're all working very hard together. Malaysia is hosting the event. So WNBF Malaysia, 2 young guys, Sim and Edward, I think this is only their 3rd year promoting, and they took it on the chin to, basically host this event and put it on. So it's really great to see a lot of young people who are motivated and who love the sport working towards that goal. We just need to stay consistent. And I think we need to stay consistent, 1, with the work ethic, but 2, with the ability to collaborate. Because I think that's the one thing in natural bodybuilding that really gets scrutinized the most, is there's just not a lot of willingness to collaborate. And I think that Galaxy is going to be a great image of what can happen if you are willing to work together towards something, because ultimately it's not for us. I imagine probably we're going to lose money this year on the Galaxy. It's not for us, it's for the athletes, it's for the sport, right? So the only way to get to that level, like I said, where we're closing the gap is if we can have everyone come together and work on the good of the sport as opposed to, the good of my individual event and how much I can make from this individual event. Like that, if you have that mindset, we're just going to be stuck kind of in quicksand. The mindset of I just need to make as much money off this event as I possibly can. You want to do something where the athletes see that every single year you're putting more into it, and it's not just like, okay, we're gonna improve the banner, or we're gonna improve the medal, or that, but really genuinely putting more into each event. And if the athletes see that, then they want to come back. And if you continue to raise the bar to the point where the athletes are like, man, this is a great thing to be a part of, and they really all seem to be working together to put on something for us, then the sport is only going to get better and better. And I'm just grateful for everyone that has come on board with this project. Grateful for what you guys do as well, right? Because I don't think enough people give like guys like yourself credit. You guys probably take a lot of shit from different angles for saying this or saying that. It's a very difficult position
We're
that you
covered
guys,
in it.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very difficult position you guys are in because you want to stay unbiased. You want to, just project the news, but then it's so many different, federations and athletes, and you're favoring this or you're favoring that. So it's a difficult position to be in. But ultimately, the more we can all work together and grow the sport despite our different ideologies, that's the only way it's going to get to where we need it to get to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and the term, right, like for what you're doing, you're investing, right? And people are seeing that. I've talked, you talk with promoters and it's like, well, I'm going to take a loss if I do that. It's like, yeah, you will, but an investment is a short-term loss for that long-term, unrealized gain, which will be, the exponential growth, hopefully, of the market over there and the shows and the interest. And that's where like even if you personally don't see that financial gain, at least the sport will in years to come, right? Hopefully, with what you're doing. Hopefully you guys are very successful in, next year, the year after, all those things. And it's not a very long growth curve, but yeah, it's investment in the sport, and it's, the other term that just kind of like popped into mind is like it's a catalyst that the sport needed, right? For like too long, it's literally just like, well, what's next year's show going to be? Same venue, same DJ, same tanning, same soundtrack, same everything. And then we, get upset when we can't get these things into the sport, like the finances that you guys are talking about, the big prize pools. Like, well, you have to invent new things and be, proactive with growth. And that's what you guys are doing, finding new ways, new avenues to platform the athletes.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I don't want to go too far down that road. Maybe some promoters will get upset or whatever, but
I'm okay with upsetting.
the thing is, right? Okay, here's the thing. Natural bodybuilding has been in a certain place for many decades at this point, and it does require that investment into it. And yeah, sure, you might lose a bit of money, but unless you're putting on events that visually look great, so from the media perspective, right, you're putting on events where the stage looks great, the trophies, the medals, everything looks visually good. So unless you're putting in the investment into the production and then also trying to put investment into the prize pool or whatever it might be for your individual event, unless you're really trying to go above and beyond, the other side of it too is you can't really expect to make a ton of money from being a promoter. This is what people need to understand. You're not going to make a ton of money just trying to run an event every single year. The only way you're going to make money as a promoter is when you start to generate interest from the corporate sponsors, when you start to get these companies coming in and saying that they want to be a part of this event, right? Because that is the cash flow that is ultimately going to allow you to grow your business. Whereas if you're afraid, okay, I might lose $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 on this event, so I'm going to take away. I don't need the LED screen, or I don't need, the big trophies, or if I don't need the cash prize to be 5,000, let's just make it 1,000 per athlete or whatever. The athletes see that, number one, and it's kind of discouraging to them, and they see that it's kind of, below, let's say, what other events are doing. But then also the companies see that. So you reach out to a company that you want to sponsor you, and they kind of look at your photos or your media from the previous event, and you're just and they have no interest, right? And so how can you expect it to grow from a business standpoint as well as from the sports standpoint if you're not willing to take a bit of that risk, on the head, for a few years? And that's kind of the mentality that I think we've had here with Dubai, my partner Charles and I, as well as, like, I think you see with quite a bunch of natural bodybuilding events now around the globe, they're starting to put more into it. And that's ultimately the healthy thing to do. But it is a bit of fear, right? Because at the end of the day, you start a business, you want to make money. And when you see that, year one, year two, year three, you're in the red, it's a scary endeavor, right? So I can understand it, but at the same time, um, you know, it's a risk you kind of need to take if you want it to become bigger and better every single year.
That's
I would love to
short-term risk
stay, but I
for
have to
long-term.
go. Kyle, it was great chatting with you, and I very much look forward to see what's to come.
I appreciate it, man. Go get your cardio, your workout, or whatever it is done.
Not quite.
Baby. See ya.
Probably can't hear the baby screaming in the background.
But
Go
I was
ahead,
gonna
Dave.
say you see that long-term, you know, potential for both your show and the sport, which we love to see. There's a lot of just poo-pooing on natural bodybuilding in general, but I think you can clearly see that, if we invest in it, there is that potential for it to, become big. Not that it isn't big now, but maybe huge. And I love that.
People want it to be big. That's the thing. People are crying for it to be bigger. People are like
Yeah, they're
pleading.
craving it. Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to, are we all willing to work together towards something big? And if we are, I think we can make it possible, right? But, you can't tell me that if we could produce events to a certain scale consistently, that natural bodybuilding wouldn't be on par with the other side of the sport. Because it would, because it's honestly, it should be the preferred method. You don't have to take so many health risks. Of course, there's the other side where guys are always just going to look bigger and better and leaner and whatnot, more 3D. But to the average athlete, I would imagine if we could put on events to a certain scale, at least 50% would be picking natural bodybuilding because they don't have to take that huge risk with their health. Of course, many would take the other avenue for whatever reasons, but we need to get it to the point where it seems worthwhile for them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we already saw that on the other side of the sport, where like you saw the rise of classic physique as being like the healthier, less, freaky alternative to that side of the sport, right? And then now we're seeing some natural athletes go and do well in that, right? So there's hopefully the trend is heading in the direction of natural bodybuilding being the more popular, at least in North America. Like you said, it is in certain regions of the world already, and I love that. I had something else and I've completely forgotten it now because we got off. That's the 7 a.m. brain. Yeah, so let's close it out by talking exact details, right? So you've got a couple shows coming up. Let's talk about those real quick. Let's talk date for the WNBF Galaxy, where they can find all that information, and let the people know like where they can find you.
Yeah, we got the WNBF Dubai Amateur Championship coming up on April 19th. So it's a bit of a smaller show. It's more for like the regional athletes. There's no pro section to that event, but it's quite a good show. It's quite an interesting show. We'll be offering about 5 to 6 pro cards depending on entries and classes. Then we have our big show, which is the WNBF Gulf Super Pro here in Dubai. That will be on September 20th, potentially 2021. It depends on entries if we need to do a second day or not. That's obviously our premier show over here in the UAE. It's got both the amateur as well as the pro segment. Last year, we had three world champions on the stage at our show. Dirk won our bodybuilding, and then Hader Souza won our men's physique, who then went on to win the overall. And then our bikini champion was the two-time world bikini champion. So it's a great show, really, really competitive. So if you're a pro athlete in the WNBF or you're aspiring to be a pro athlete and you really want to go to a show that invests in the athletes, I think it's a great show for you guys. And then with WNBF India, I'm looking to launch the first WNBF India show ever in October in Mumbai. So that's going to be massive. That's going to be, I don't even know what the numbers would be. I'm going to have to put a cutoff. I think I told the Asian guys from Natty Society the other week that probably going to have to cut it off around 250 for the first show just to make sure it's still run to a certain quality, because you can slippery slope the bigger the show gets. And then the Galaxy is November 8th and 9th, I believe, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The guys over there do a phenomenal job with their muscle mash. They've had 2 shows so far, WNBF Malaysia, and I've gotten the opportunity to head judge last year as well as judge the year before. They do a great job, and I know this show is going to be even bigger and more of a spectacle. So, yeah, November 8th and 9th will be the Galaxy, heading into the World Championship 2 weeks later. So, big year for the WNBF, big year for natural bodybuilding. I'm sure you guys got your work cut out for you. So, I don't wish to have your jobs. Actually, I think my job is a little bit easier. I can just focus on the business of running the show. You guys have to cover everything. So, big year for natural bodybuilding, and I'm just excited to see the sport grow.
Might be a
Yeah.
bit of a stretch, but we'll take it.
Well, it's easy to be mad at us, but that's all right. That's what we signed up for, right? So yeah, Kyle, I'm very interested to see how the show goes. I think with the expertise that you guys have, in your team of promoters, it's going to be run very effectively, very efficiently. I think the turnout's going to be great. So we'll be looking to see, as you guys release maybe some athletes, who will be showing up, who will be competing, who we can expect to see some matchups with. And yeah, thank you again for your time and also for your work in the sport. I want to thank you personally just for what you guys are doing because again, there's a lot of conflict in the sport. There's a lot of politics, back and forth, but I think you guys are leading with a positive example of what the sport needs, and hopefully other people pay attention to that as well and just kind of follow suit, right? Rising tide lifts all ships, they say.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys
Where
having
can
me
people
on.
where can people find you if they want to find more information, announcements, all that fun stuff too? Where's the best outlets for you guys? What do you
You
recommend?
can head over to WNBF UAE or WNBF India or WNBF Pro Galaxy. I'm not myself personally a huge social media guy, so I won't plug myself. I'll just plug those events.
There we go. Perfect. All right, guys. Well,
Instagram, I assume.
yeah.
I do, I do. I follow you, I think, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't do a whole lot of social media stuff on my personal page. So just follow the events and you can get all the information.
Cool.
There we go. And I'm sure registrations and stuff will be linked in the bios and all that. Ease of access for people. So, all right, guys. Well, if you like the episode, if you like what Kyle and his crew are doing, make sure you give us a like, subscribe, follow, as well as their show pages. Sign up if you're interested, and we will see you guys in the next one.